NaMu MyoHoRenGeKyo. NaMu MyoHoRenGeKyo. NaMu MyoHoRenGeKyo. NaMu MyoHoRenGeKyo, NaMu MyoHoRenGeKyo. Opening of the eyes, or as it's translated here, open your eyes. I don't know if I can read all of these translations. They're so terrible. But nevertheless, what they're translating still, with our scholarship, with our reasoned, rational minds, we can sort through the crud and see Nichiren's meaning, and scholarship comes right through. So thank goodness for that, yeah? Chapter 12, the 3,000 existences contained in one thought doctrine as the seed of Buddhahood. So Nichiren is going to continue once again reinvestigating the 3,000 realms doctrine, which is what others might refer to as original enlightenment, or the state of energy formations that has been with us and continues to drive all life in the universe since its inception. That's what that means. And Nichiren begins with Grandmaster Dengyo, the primogenitor of exoteric and esoteric Buddhism in Japan, has said in his outstanding principles of the Lotus Sutra, quote, "The canons of other sects, other schools, also preach some ultimate reality, which is the mother of Buddhahood." Now it's the mother, before it was the father. "However, those scriptures have motherly love, but no strictness of the father." Oh, now we know why mother, father. So there's a discipline involved in Buddhism, yeah? So we're identifying the discipline as masculine. Whatever. There's been plenty of women in my life who've had more discipline than any men I've known. But only the Tendai Lotus sect, Dengyo continues, with both its strictness and love, is the parent of all sages, wise men, those who have much to learn and nothing to learn, as well as those who aspire for enlightenment. I don't know about the nothing to learn part, but probably really means just accomplished people, right? Even accomplished people still have to aspire to enlightenment. Because having a Buddha state of mind isn't an easy thing to simply hang on to, let alone to awaken to. Because we are human animals. We are sentient, but we exist in a samsaric form, a physical and therefore quite attached form of energy, albeit momentum, through time-space. To be truly aware of how this entire phenomenal existence creates this experience, it's a tough thing to maintain, yeah? Nichiren continues. As for the 3 steps for attaining Buddhahood, its seed, in other words, the idea has to present itself in your mind before it can be something that can be aspired to, right? The nurturing, which is our development in Buddha wisdom, in our learning how to train our mind toward that altered perception. And the harvest, the actual accomplishment of that mind, Buddha. Yeah? So a lot of 3s in Buddhism, but this makes sense. There has to be the realization of something to attain, the training in order to attain it, and then the attainment. Not unlike the 3 bodies of the Buddha, right? There's the teaching, the experience of Buddha, but the only place you can have the experience of the Buddha is in the mind, which is an emergent property of this accommodative body, this, right? This apparatus. And then the experience of that, which is a very human, sentient thing, is where our joy, amazement, compassion, all of those feelings, those understandings, those depths of integration come from the experience of Buddha. So those are the 3 in the forms of Buddha, yeah? Those 3 steps, even those terms, are not mentioned in the canons of Shingon for all of its plagiarism, or Kigan sect, much less its true meaning. Even if they allude to it, they don't really understand the depth of what they're talking about. They're just throwing terms around, yeah? They maintain that one is able to reach the first of the 10 stages of bodhisattvahood and obtain Buddhahood within the present lifetime. However, as provisional sutras, they do not preach the planting of the seeds previous to, thus they talk about attaining Buddhahood without planting seeds, which is like Chiao Kao of China or Yuge no Dokyo of Japan trying to usurp the throne without any right. What Dengyo is alluding to here, or Nichiren quoting Dengyo about planting seeds in the past, is a recognition that this has been the situation since time-space began, this universe began. That this formation clue as to all life, this engine, it's always been here. To recognize that within one's experience is quite profound and humbling. And it is an aspect of understanding the entire picture, right? These schools of Buddhism fight one another for superiority, but I, Nichiren, do not jump in the scramble, leaving the matter to sutras. This is an important thing, and I brought this up before. Nichiren isn't inventing anything here. Nichiren isn't arguing with these other schools based on whether or not he can interpret their language or their mysticism or their rules and so forth for their merits. Nichiren simply goes back to Shakyamuni's teachings and says, how is what you're saying in any way in agreement with the founder, Shakyamuni? You're not doing as he taught. You're not doing, you're not practicing Buddhism. You're practicing Bobism, Johnism, Lucyism, your Ikedaism. You're not following Shakyamuni's teaching. You're inventing your own, and you're layering it on top as though you're frosting a cake, but your frosting doesn't belong on this cake. It's obfuscating the cake. Based on the concept of the seed of Buddhahood preached in the Lotus Sutra, Bodhisattva Vasubandhu insisted on the supremacy of the seed. Right? The germination of an idea is primary. Without that, then how can there be an idea? In his discourse on the Lotus Sutra, this later became developed, discussed as the 3,000 existences contained in one thought moment doctrine of Great Master Tendai. Thousands of years later, the seed of the various venerable ones appearing in such Mahayana sutras as the Flower Garland and the Great Sun Buddha Sutras is, without exception, this 3,000 existences contained in one thought doctrine. It was Grandmaster Tendai alone who perceived this in the history of Buddhism to that date, to that time, to that capacity. Right? So early on, there may have been a logical inference of a seed of Buddhism, what starts us on this path. But as people became more and more, you could say sophisticated, you could also say more distracted, understanding the nature of that seed, the depth, the profoundness of that seed, right? Like we today, because of, talk about distraction, we're drowning in it, yeah? But anyone who studies even or is exposed to the slightest bit of science knows how far we've taken our perceptive abilities, our reason and our rational mind, and are equipping ourselves and peering deeper and deeper into the nature of everything. The idea of a fundamental starting point, an initiation, a spark that sets the whole thing in motion, it's becoming much, much more real and far less magical, right? Look up the, I think it's the Krebs cycle, Krebs, K-R-E-P-S, Krebs cycle in biochemistry or biology. It's chemical, but the two they all interplay. And the physics of energy moving through a cell, right? We're big energy consumers. How do we create that energy? How do we use that energy? How do we manifest cells, molecules, so on and so forth, in this moment-to-moment remanifestation of this huge momentum of all of these atoms and photons, electrons, cells, mitochondria, molecules, so on and so forth? How does that just keep moving on? It self-generates. How does it do that? This is what the discussion of 3,000 realms in a single thought moment is talking about. Now, even if you're just beginning to grasp that idea, awesome as it is, knock you down realization as it is, understanding that everything around you is doing exactly the same thing. No, they're inanimate objects. It's a desk, it's a chair. It's doing the same thing. Not biologically creating a human, but it is nonetheless these incessant transfers of energy manifesting certain properties, characteristics, potentials. And we know this because nothing is permanent. Even in the short span of a lifetime, we can see how something can be made brand new, fresh. You could smell it, see it, use it. And over time, it wears, it creaks, it dissolves right in front of you. You can hand it down to your children, your grandchildren, even your great-grandchildren. At some point, they will witness the demise of whatever it is, no matter how well built. This is the nature of everything in the universe. It arises, and as soon as it arises, it begins to degrade and disassemble until it dissolves entirely. Nothing is permanent. No thing. Even the atoms and molecules that they're made of. All phenomena obey this rule. Chen Quan of the Flower Garland sect plagiarized this document to interpret a saying in the Flower Garland Sutra, quote, "Mind is like a skillful painter." That's a wonderful poetic thing to say, but what is it really saying? What is the perception there? What is the core thought there? It's hard to nail down, isn't it? It's pretty, and it's not wrong, but how profound a thinking is it? How profound are you willing to chase it? Right? The canons of the True Word sect, such as the Great Sun Buddha Sutra, do not contain any of the doctrines of, quote, attainment of Buddhahood by men of the two vehicles. Right? They still treat them like crap. You'll never attain Buddhahood. Right? There's a prejudice of ignorance, isn't it? And all of the pre-Lotus Sutra teachings have this ignorance. Shakyamuni's attainment of enlightenment in the eternal past. Shakyamuni's enlightenment of the Buddha condition of timelessness. That would have been a better translation, yeah? Or 3,000 existences contained in one thought, in every single moment. And I don't know why this translation doesn't put moment in that, because every other one does. Having come to China and read the MyoHoRenGeKyo, the Great Concentration and Insight, one of Tendai's 3 major documents, Subakarashima's thought of reading the Tendai concept of 3,000 existences contained in one thought moment into such expressions as the Great Sun Buddha as reality of mind. See, they took this 3,000 existences in one thought moment and described all of its profundity to the mind, right? That's why we get these sutras on the mind alone, enlightenment. But isn't that completely missing the point? Yes, the mind alone is the perceptor of this phenomena. Yes, the mind alone is the residence for Buddha-ness, for the realization and the experience of Buddha-ness. But the mind is not Buddha. The mind is not the only place. The mind is simply the perceiver of something that has always gone on since time without beginning and on. This formation process of energies into stuff, time-space itself, is a manifestation of energy. Yes, the mind is the only locale, the only emergent property of this huge mechanism of life called the universe, where it can be witnessed. That's amazing. That's yours and mine. That's something to be awestruck by, and also a conduit by which we can be impressed, compassionate, wanting to have those we share this existence with realize as well. Why? Why are we doing all this? For one reason: to live this life to its fullest, free of, liberated of, the delusion that we can make it all ours, the attachments, the, quote, suffering, which is really anxiety, fear, all emotions tied to possession. And the only thing we have a right to feel possessive about is the experience of life, which is a moving target, moment to moment to moment to moment. Once that becomes your basis of reality, then what is there to stress about? You don't have to worry about ownership, loss, all of those fears. Everything becomes a benefit. Everything becomes a glorious experience. Everything becomes, in a statement, life affirming. When we worry about losing things or getting things we don't have, we're not affirming life. We're acting as though life cannot be affirmed without that, without this, without regaining that, without not losing this. It's conditional, and that's the delusion. The reality is, it's all happening at the same time. When you realize that, you begin to flow with it instead of trying to interrupt it, change it, stop it. That's where your pain comes from. If you flow down the rapids, the water, the flow of the water itself will send you around obstacles. But if you try to stop your movement, you're likely going to break yourself, a limb, your head, because you're working against the flow of energy. Nichiren continues. So, Great Son Buddha as reality of the mind, and the Buddha as the origin of all things. It's not the Buddha that's the origin of all things. Buddha is our mind of observation and experience of the origin of all things. See, again, the translation is misleading. In order to lay the foundations for Chen Yen, the true word sect, he further adopts the finger signs, right, the mudras and the mantras. In the scope of our discussion, doesn't that just sound absolutely silly? And yet, generations of people thought, yeah, if I do these things, it'll change the way the world works. Whew, magic. And he created a theology of, quote, equality in doctrine but superior in ritualism. Because not only do we understand with the mind, but by putting our fingers and our thumbs in the air in this particular way, we integrate it. I mean, it's just so ridiculous, yeah? And it comes from a long lineage, way before Buddhism, of ritualism, right? Trying to emulate a tree or a rock, or, right? Because other is more powerful than whatever's going on in our mind. Human beings. Wow. Maintaining that the Lotus Sutra and the Great Sun Buddha Sutra were equal in doctrine because both have the 3,000 existences contained in one thought. Lie. But in ritualism, the latter is superior because it has the finger signs and the mantras, the magical incantations, words. Right? I just had this question come up again. No, the daimoku is not words. Look at them. Those are characters. And those characters are just pictorial stand-ins for the concepts, the training, the ideas, the 3,000 realms in a single thought moment ideas in the Dharma, the teaching of the experience of Buddha, of the reality of all phenomena, including we are no less phenomena than the planet or the stars. Where in the Great Sun Buddha Sutra can we find doctrines of the attainment of Buddhahood by men of the two vehicles? If they're so profound, then how can they prohibit certain people from attaining Buddhahood? Right? Again, books like that are books of governance, how to control people. And mutually possessed characteristics of the 10 realms. They don't even understand the 10 potential worlds that we experience. They claim the 3,000 realms in a single thought moment, but they don't even explain how they got there. They just take it whole hog and go, well, that's what the mind does. Now make these positions. Ugh! Right? It's crazy. And this is represented in the diamond realm, the matrix store realm mandalas. Where, look at their mandalas, which are supposed to be not dilutions. What do you call it? Language. Anyway, the mandalas are supposed to be condensed versions of their teaching. And it's not represented anywhere in there. They just made pretty pictures. Right? Again, mudras, mantras, magic. It's not Buddhism. This is the most serious falsification of all. Grandmaster Dengyo declared in the Tendai as the fountainhead of Buddhist sects, quote, the newly transmitted Shingon True Word sect has hidden the fact that its proud transition of doctrine was in fact smeared by the former Tendai monk I Ching, who fooled Subakarashima, wrote fooled by, remember the story, Subakarashima saw the teachings of Tendai and he influenced a young monk to create new teachings of Shakyamuni. What? That would indicate that what he was doing and their doctrines, well, we already had that. Ours is even more profound than Tendai's. No, you poser, you liar. And I Ching, complicit as hell, is the one who wrote this down in a style that was somewhat believable to those that Subakarashima would then fool, manipulate. It's the world of anger, yeah? And he wrote the 3,000 existences contained in one thought moment doctrine into the Shingon. The Kigon flower garland sect, which had been introduced to Japan earlier, has hidden the influence of Tendai upon its theology as Fatsang's 5 teachings based on the 4 teachings of Tendai. Again, a complete plagiarism. And you notice the word theology keeps cropping up, which right away is not Buddhism. Because what is theology? It's theistic. The proposition of the word is deification. Right? What do we call a country ruled by religion? A theocracy. It's theist. Buddhism is as far away from theism and theology as you can get. It's individual. It's a self-practice. It's not from outside. It's not magical. It's not mystical. You do this. It's your mind. Get it right. That's Buddhism. So the more I keep running into that word in these translations, the more upsetting it is. And if that's truly what Nichiren is talking about, then you might as well throw away the whole ball of wax because it's not Buddhism. What are we doing? I wish I could burn these down. If one had gone to Hokkaido, he might be able to claim this well-known Japanese poem by Hitomaro to be his own. Quote, "At the first light of dawn, a boat leaves the foggy beach of Akashi, disappearing behind an island." It's pretty. It's just a poem, kind of a little haiku. But what Nichiren is pointing to is, just because you go on vacation there doesn't mean you can usurp authorship of that poem. You can experience it, but you can't claim to have thought it, wrote it, distributed it before the author. So that's what he's saying these other scholars have done with Tendai's teachings. They're mere passers-by. And they listen or read some of his teachings and they go, "Oh, crap, that's a really good idea. Think I'll take that as my own." People still do that today, right? That's why we have some silly thing called copyright, amongst other things. Nichiren continues, "Perhaps islanders would be fooled by such a man. So are scholars of China and Japan by Subakarashima and Fatsang. Yang Shu of the Tendai school in China had this to say, quote, "Compared to the Lotus Sutra, teachings of schools such as Chenyen, Shingon, Chan, or Zen, Huayan, Kigon, and Sanlun, or Sanran, are expedient gates leading to the true teaching of the Lotus." If you can manage to meander your way through those schools, ultimately you have to end up at the Lotus Sutra. Well, that's an interestingly wise thing to say in light of Shakyamuni 3,000 years ago saying, study all of Buddhism broadly, because ultimately you'll end up, if you're a scholar, if you don't get hooked into these minor teachings, if you go the distance, you have to end up at MyoHoRenGeKyo. You have to end up there. If you don't, then you've cheated yourself. You've let yourself get pulled away from the prize. Quote, he goes on, "It is because of this false preaching stolen from the Tendai doctrine that Venerable Subakarashima was punished by Emma, the Lord of the Law. It must have been due to his change of mind and submission to the Lotus Sutra that he was later released. Remember, there's a whole big story about this. You can look that up. It was to show their submission to the Lotus Sutra that Subhakarashima and Amogajvajra, or Pukung, thereafter placed the Lotus Sutra in the center between the Diamond Realm Mandala and the Matrix Door Realm Mandala, as if it were the great king served at left and right by the two subordinates, the Great Sun Buddha Sutra of the Matrix Door Realm and the Diamond Peak Sutra of the Diamond Realm. In other words, they subjugated those teachings to the true master of teachings. In assessing the doctrines of various sutras, Kobo of Japan regarded the flower garland higher than the Lotus Sutra, the latter being placed on the 8th stage in the development of mind, behind the Great Sun Buddha and the flower garland. However, he too, in transmitting ritualism to his own disciples, such as Jitsu and Shinga, and to disciples of Grandmaster Dangyo, such as Encho and Kojo, placed the Lotus Sutra in the center between the two mandalas, as mentioned above. Eventually, these scholars had to come to recognize that they couldn't fool all of the people all of the time. Right? In another instance, when Grandmaster Qianxiang, or Qizang, of the Sun Lun sect, wrote the Faha Xuan Lun, or the treatise on the profundity of the Lotus Sutra, in 10 facets, he maintained, in contradiction to Tendai, that the Lotus Sutra was preached during the 4th and not the 5th period of Shakyamuni's lifetime, because it was meant to lead the two vehicles of Sravaka and Pratyekabuddha into bodhisattvahood, or to destroy men of the two vehicles so as to establish bodhisattvas. However, he later submitted to Tendai and served him 7 years, discontinuing his own lectures, dispersing his disciples, and even making himself a stool for Tendai to climb up into a pulpit. He is so embarrassed that he had tried to usurp the teachings of Tendai and relegated the Lotus Sutra to such a servile position. He understood his mistake, and he spent the rest of his life, in his way, atoning for it. Now, is there atonement in Buddhism? Not in the sense of religion. Atonement, if you want to equate it with something in Buddhism, is really submission to your own suffering. You simply don't need to do that. Just enlighten your mind. Correctly perceive the nature of all phenomena, and you'll stop drudging through life and start to see life as a full expression of your potential. You stop getting in your own way. That's the closest thing you can come to an association of self-punishment. Because once you know better, why would you continue, right? Where are we time-wise? No, we're good. Grandmaster Tsuen of the Fa Shang, the the Dharma characteristics sect, expressed many false concepts in his Fa Yan Ling Chang in 7 facets or 12 facets, depending on the translation. Looking down on the Lotus Sutra, he wrote, quote, "The one vehicle teaching for all people is merely an expedient." Yeah. While the 3 separate teachings for bodhisattvas, shravakas, pratyekabuddhas, that's the true teaching. Wait a minute. Okay. So you're saying I can get from here to Boston in 1 flight in an hour and a half. But the best way to get to Boston is to take a mule to San Francisco, then walk, 400 miles, and bicycle across Colorado, and take a train to the East Coast, and then take another train up the East Coast, and then maybe a subway, and maybe a puddle jumper, and yeah, all of that. That's the best way to get to Boston. Wow, people must have been really gullible, yeah? Or just ignorant as hell. Yeah, that one vehicle teaching, that Lotus, is just for, getting to Buddhahood immediately. But, do these other teachings for Shravakas and Pratyekabuddhas and Arhats and, all those privations and rules. And, yeah, you got to do all that. That expedient, it's too easy. However, one of his disciples, Shifu, later wrote the Fa Suang San Yao Chi, in the fourth facile of which he maintained that the one vehicle teaching in the Lotus is also true. Also true. Although his written statements were ambiguous, his heart was with Tendai. So he was influenced by the Tendai school, yeah, for him to get this clue. Yeah, my teacher, yeah, he says what he says, but the one vehicle, I think that's the way to go. Pretty courageous. Could have been killed for that. Betrayal. Chen Quan of the Flower Garland sect wrote a commentary on the Flower Garland Sutra in which he compared it with the Lotus Sutra and seemed to have concluded that the Lotus Sutra was expedient, was more efficacious. However, he later wrote that the Tendai sect considered the 3,000 existences contained in one thought doctrine to be true, as did his own sect. Is it not that Chen Quan regretted what he had just written earlier? So did Grandmaster Kobo. Without a mirror, one cannot see one's own face. Without enemies, one cannot see one's own faults. Scholars of the Shingon and other schools did not realize their own faults until they met Grandmaster Dengyo. Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah, well, yeah. Either we submit to Dengyo or we find a way around him. Humans. Therefore, we say that although Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, men, and gods appearing in various sutras seem to have attained Buddhahood through their respective sutras, in reality, they were truly enlightened because of the Lotus Sutra. The four great vows of Shakyamuni and other Buddhas, such as saving countless numbers of people, were fulfilled in this Sutra of the Lotus. In the second chapter, it is stated, quote, "My Buddha's wishes are all fully satisfied." Now we move on to chapter 13, the five great proclamation. Again, this translation, holy, probably, they're not holy. They're supremely insightful, yeah, but they're not, golden and holy. So the five proclamations. You know what? I'm going to save that, yeah, for the next video. This Gosho, this book of Siddhartha Gautama, interpretation by Nichiren Shonin, our mentor, our teacher, our modern exemplar, is moving methodically through all of the logistical arguments of the entire corpus of Shakyamuni's teachings, obviating the competing schools in his time in Japan, in medieval Japan, but by extension, how this has occurred and reoccurred since Shakyamuni's day, certainly since his demise, and demonstrating time and time again that the real scholarship, the real reading of Shakyamuni's words, and the understanding and insight of those teachings, once again, keeps on coming up throughout time, authoritatively stamping out all of those who would practice anything, let alone Buddhism, for their own gain, for their own political purposes, for their own enrichment, not spiritual enrichment, but physical enrichment, yeah? Power, control, land, money, name it. And what's all of that about, ultimately? Isn't that attachment, possession? How can it be true Buddhism if it's based on possessions? Ask yourself that. Are you chanting for a new car? A better relationship? How many possessions must you amass before your pile of possessions gets you to the Brahma heaven? That is not Buddhism. In fact, Buddhism is the exact opposite. It is the critical realization that the whole universe, the procession of energy throughout time-space, is already occurring within your very existence. You already have it all, so does everyone else. How about that? All right, chapter 13 is next. I'm so impressed with you. Really, seriously, practice your participation in these videos, with no matter how many interruptions from the computer or the phone or my little dog. Congratulations. Your practice is amazing. And your life can only get better and better. I just got an email this morning from someone who's been practicing, renewed her practice through this channel, through our study, rededicated herself, got a new mandala, set it up, started regular practice. And when she first started, her emails were all about how terrible things were in her life with her kid and her living situation and so on and so forth. And I empathize, I know. But this morning I got an email saying, has this ever happened to you? Do you ever just, while you're chanting, just bust out laughing? And I wanted to say, oh yeah. And there have been times when I broke down and cried and just kept chanting through it. The nature of opening that Gohonzon in our mind, that gate into full realization, it can knock you on your butt. But it's in a good way. It's in a, oh gosh, this is what I've been doing all this time. Gosh. But instead of beating yourself up, which is what we do when we don't know a way out, when you achieve this with your practice, you do know. And then it's just laughter, tears, shaking, amazement. It's the experience of Buddha. It's so overwhelming. And yet, it's so matter of fact. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's an amazing, amazing practice. So I hope this encourages you if you're struggling right now, and validates you if you're amazed. Just keep doing it. Be kind to yourself. You know, we are human, after all. But that's no reason why we should have to be constantly worried, anxious, fearful. We can live a beautiful, fully manifested life. Why not? Right? Patrons, you know who you are. Your donations, they keep the website up. They keep the avenue to YouTube up. They give me opportunities to ameliorate the tools or keep them running, to put this channel up, the podcasts, the bookstore, the mandala store. Yeah. So, thank you so much. All of you who support this channel. And for those of you who maybe aren't in a financial place to buy books or send donations, please like and subscribe. Subscribe to this channel. It'll expand the reach on YouTube, little by little. And that's a really great thing to do. So thank you for that too. And now I'm done talking. I'll let you go. Thanks so much for being here. Deeply appreciate your participation and your practice. Bye for now.